Hello everyone, welcome to Code and Learn. So in the last lesson, we implemented two of the Unary methods on a server, that is create and get. Now that's all the server-side code. In this lesson, we are going to look at the client-side code for calling these methods on our gRPC server. So in CMD, I'm just going to create another directory under CMD called client, and inside we will have our main.go. Again, the gRPC package makes it really easy for us to create the client. So let's do that. First, we need to create a connection to the gRPC server. I can do that by using gRPC.new client, which as you can see returns a gRPC client connection. For the target, we need to specify the URL of our gRPC server. I'm just going to hard code it for now as localhost 50051. And then for option, I'm just going to use gRPC with transport credentials and secure.new credentials. This is because since our server is running locally, we are not using any transport credential to connect to it. But if you were calling the gRPC server from a client that was on a different machine, it is always suggested to use the credentials like we do with HTTP, which makes the HTTP connection to HTTPS or HTTP secure with the help of certificates. But for now, we are fine without the credentials or the certificates. Then I check if error is not equal to nil. If that is the case, I want to log it, so I will say log.fatalf new client received an error, print the error. Now using this connection, we can create a new client. So I will say client. This can be done using the generated code. So news v1 dot new service client and pass the connection. You will see this is all part of the generated code that we had. With that, we have a client available to call the gRPC server. So let's do that. First, let us create a news by calling the create method on the client. So I can say response error client dot create. The first argument is a context. So I can just do context dot background. It is always a good practice to provide a context with the timeout, but for our testing, I'm just going to use a root context of context background. Then the next argument is the request, that is the create request. Now if you remember, on the server side, we have some validations when we try to create the news. So if I send an empty request like this, it should error out. So let's log that error. If error not is equal to nil, log.fatalf create news and then log the error. For now, let's just ignore the response. That's it. Now in the terminal, let us first start our server. To do that, I will just do go run cmd server main.go. So that should mean our server is now running on localhost port 50051. Now if I do go run cmd, but this time the client main.go, let's see what happens. And as you can see, we received an error. That is all the validation errors that we expected. But we can see that we were able to call the gRPC server as the error is returned from the gRPC server itself. So let's fix that. Let's fill in the data ID uuid dot new string. Then we have the author. We'll just say test author. Title summary. For title, I will just say test title. Similar to that, I think we have content, test content, summary, test summary. What else? Source needs to be a valid URL, so I will just do https example.com. Tags will be string slice. We will say tag 1 and then tag 2. I think that's it. Now this time we want to log in the response. So I will just initialize response and then here I will just do log.printf created news, then the response. That's it. Now save it. Let's try again, clear the console. And as you can see, the news was successfully created. And we can see the same from the response. So that means our create method is working as expected. Now let us also call the next method, which is the get method, which was the other Unary method that we filled in. So this time we can do response error client dot get. Let's initialize the context here to say context.background. Then reuse the context in all the methods that we call. So context get response. Let me rename this to say create response. So there are no conflicts. Get response. We need to pass in news get request, which accepts the ID. So we can say for ID, we can just do create response.id. If there's any error, let's print it to the console, get news. Otherwise, we just want to print the news that we fetch. So I will just move this log statement here. And instead of create news, we will say get news. And that's it. Now clear the console and try to run the code again. And as you can see, we were able to fetch the news by its ID. So both the methods are working as expected using the gRPC client. Just to revise, we created a client with gRPC new client providing the target of the gRPC server. For REST API calls, you will do something like this. But in our case, you don't need to provide the scheme because it is interpreted by the gRPC client. Once we have the connection, we use the generated code to create a new client using that connection, and then from there we can just start calling the methods on the client like we did here. So that's it for this lesson. In the next lesson, we will look at the server-side streaming. That is another type of RPC supported by gRPC. Again, if you have any questions, please post a comment under the video or reach out to our Discord server. Until next time, happy coding.